But some are worried by widespread complaints of intellectual property theft, currency manipulation, and export subsidies.
China itself is likely to be a government that's likely to have a bad sovereign wealth fund that's not in the interest of the United States, and that tough regulations and oversight are needed now in advance of a problem that has not yet emerged, but given the magnitude of the flow of funds over the next decade, it's going to be a serious one.
By the year 2015, some analysts predict that foreign government sovereign wealth funds could hold $10 to $15 trillion.
But the idea that the United States government is turning to the International Monetary Fund to set standards for the sovereign wealth, this administration in so doing has basically just said it is incapable through either our Department of the Treasury or our Department of Commerce or certainly the White House to come up with its own standards and regulations for this economy. These people, do they have any concept of what fools they look to be?
I can't speak for them, but I can say that many of the sovereign wealth fund managers have said that they want to make sure those guidelines are voluntary only, that they are not set in stone, that they are voluntary.
We wouldn't want to impose on anyone, you know, American law, for goodness sake. You know, this administration would not have that. That would be unseemly of us, I think. Christine, thank you very much. A very sobering report.
Now, China can very easily just bankrupt America overnight. All they've got to do is just dump the dollars and treasuries, switch to euros or any other currency. That's the end of America. They violate human rights, they jail people, they do all these ugly things. No one's denying they do a lot of what is said. But there's a very important statistic to keep in mind, which the Chinese like to bring up, which is not reported in the Western media. The U.S., that has 5% of the world's population, has 30% of the world's incarcerated population in jails. Minorities, human rights, all the global rights organizations accuse America of being the biggest violator of human rights. Chinese like to bring it up every time American politicians sit there and trying to hammer home human rights. And they go, wait a minute, what human rights? You're talking to us about Tibetans, this, that, and the other. What about blacks, Latinos, poor China, you know, Americans? You know, what is human rights when you're dealing with a country like China that is 1.5 billion population, officially, unofficially a lot more. That's 1/4 of the world's population. They have raised more people out of poverty in the last 5 years than the entire population of America. But when it comes to China, because they are basically America's factory, because over 60% of the factories that manufacture all the products you see here, even next door, Cost Plus, are foreign owned. They're not Chinese owned. China provides the labor and the materials. 60% of the factories that create the product that is bought in America are foreign owned. Over 50% of those factories are American owned. That's a staggering statistic. They're the ones who are saying, why are you going to create all these sanctions and, you know, embargoes against China? Because then we have to move our factories to Vietnam or other low-cost producing countries. We don't want to make the move. That is why China owns America today. Because China, manufacturing base, is foreign owned. What did the Chinese know coming out of a communist system about all this high-tech capitalist manufacturing? Think about it. It had to come from overseas, whether it's indirectly through Taiwan or Hong Kong or directly through the U.S. Look at any major manufacturer here or supplier here. Walmart, pick a company. Next door, Cost Plus. They're all American companies that manufacture the products. And guess what? They get paid in U.S. dollars. Hence, China owns America today.
There's been a lot of discussion these days about the tight financial relationship between China and the United States. Well, at this rice shop in Hong Kong, I thought I'd take the opportunity to explain to you exactly what's at stake in this relationship. This jar represents the amount of debt or treasuries that the U.S. had to issue in 2006 in order to finance its budget deficit. This rice represents China's money. 1 grain is the equivalent of 5 million U.S. dollars. So in 2006, the Chinese lent the United States about this much, half. So let's talk now about 2008. The U.S. had to issue a lot more treasuries to finance its ballooning budget deficit. China bought about this much. So China bought 3 times more. It's a smaller percentage of the overall whole, but take a look at how much more debt the U.S. has. That's why the U.S. government is looking for buyers wherever they can find them, and China has a whole lot of cash. So why would China need to buy U.S. debt? Well, China has a lot of U.S. dollars from all its exports, and it needs a safe place to park those dollars and watch them grow. It's within China's interest to keep feeding the U.S. economy and help it grow so that Americans can be happy and well fed and buy more Chinese goods.
According to the Anti-Defamation League, Joe Bannister, Dave Von Kleist, who's been on the show, Jack McLam, and Ted Gunderson are now considered extremist speakers. Joe Bannister is a former top IRS agent who states that there is no law requiring Americans to pay income tax. Dave Von Kleist, of course, is a radio talk show host who produced the riveting documentary 911 in Plain Sight.
And Jack McLam is an award-winning former policeman and Vietnam vet. Ted Gunderson is a former FBI agent and Oklahoma City bombing researcher who's tired of government lies. But according to the Anti-Defamation League, opposing income taxes, spreading conspiracy theories, and distrust of the government are now on par with racism, hate crimes, and anti-Semitism.
The ADL's campaign to portray tax protesters, sovereign seekers, and 911 activists as racists dovetailed with a House Homeland Security Subcommittee hearing on terrorism and the Internet. The hearing, chaired by Democratic Representative Jane Harman, a sponsor of the Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Prevention Act recently passed by the House, now puts anyone who questions the government or speaks out in public against policy in the same boat with Muslim jihadists.
Sources say Harman was overheard talking to an investigative target whose conversations were being legally intercepted. Congressional Quarterly and the New York Times report that Harman discussed using her influence to reduce espionage-related charges against 2 officials of the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee. In return, the person with whom she was speaking would lobby then-House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi to appoint Harman chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Pelosi says there was no such lobbying.
It isn't true. No. Mrs. Harman, Congresswoman Harman, has many friends who advocate for her, and to juxtapose that on any other activities that are going on is just not correct.
In her letter to Holder, Harman says it is entirely appropriate to converse with advocacy organizations and denies contacting anyone to influence the AIPAC case. CQ also reports that after the intercept, the FBI tried to open an investigation of Harman, but Attorney General Alberto Gonzales pulled the plug because he wanted Harman's help defending the controversial domestic warrantless wiretapping program, which she supported.
Today, the former Attorney General had no comment. The Justice Department says only that it is reviewing Harman's letter. As for that deal that was allegedly discussed, Harman did not get the Intelligence Committee chairmanship, and the trial of the AIPAC officials is slated for June.